Alright then, Goku in DC, Season 3, Episode 13. Superman gets angry as Goku arrives. So let's go ahead and get into it. The air between them seemed to crystallize, charged with the immeasurable force of two beings who had the capability of shattering worlds. With a roar that was part fury and part desperation, General Zod launched himself forward. Superman met the charge, not with sound, but with a grim, unyielding resolve. Their trajectories were perfect lines of destructive intent, converging at a point in the sky above Metropolis. The moment before impact was a vacuum of silence, a city holding its breath. Then, their fists collided. It was not merely a punch, it was a cataclysm. A visible spherical shockwave of pure concussive energy erupted from the point of contact, expanding outward at hypersonic speed. The sound was not a bang, but a deep tectonic crack that struck the chest before it reached the ears. Every pane of glass within a half-mile radius became a victim of this unleashed fury. Windows and skyscrapers, car windshields, storefronts, and office complexes didn't just crack. They simultaneously vaporized into a billion glittering shards of glass. A shimmering, deadly rain of crystalline dust began to fall over the city, catching the sunlight in a horrifically beautiful display of absolute power. The first and most visceral testament to the battle of sun gods that were now raging in its heart of the city. The titanic force of their collision acted like a divine double-edged sword, hurling the combatants apart. Superman was driven downward like a nail, carving a furrow through a skyscraper before cratering into the intersection below. Zod, conversely, was catapulted upward, a speck against the sun, spinning uncontrollably for a brief moment before he reoriented himself, hovering high above the wounded city. He looked down at the crater where his enemy had fallen. A cruel, calculating smile twisted his lips. He tucked his arms back, his body becoming a spear, and he dove straight forward. Downward, he cut through the atmosphere, not with the grace of a bird, but with the terrifying inevitability of a meteor. The air itself screamed around his form, generating a plasma-like sheath around his body. At the very last second, a battered Superman rolled from the epicenter, his reflexes saving him from the direct hit. Zod struck the earth. The impact was not an explosion, but a pure upheaval. The ground rolled in a visible wave, buckling asphalt, shearing foundations, and swallowing entire streets. Cars were tossed away like toys, and people who had been fleeing were thrown from their feet as the very city itself protested the violence done to it. From the newly formed chasm, Zod's laughter echoed monstrous and clear. Every time you dodge, Kal-El, they suffer. You must choose to protect yourself or these earthlings. Emboldened by his new strategy, Zod's eyes began to glow. They glowed a malevolent crimson light, but instead of aiming it at the recovering Superman, he swept his heat vision laterally across the street, targeting the support columns of crowded pedestrian overpasses. Superman's eyes widened in horror. He blurred into motion, interposing his own body between the deadly beams and the structural steel. The searing energy scorching his chest as he grunted in pain, but Zod didn't relent. He ripped a massive chunk of concrete from the ground, and with a contemptuous flick of his wrist, he hurled it not at Superman, but at a group of civilians that were trapped underneath some cars. Again, Superman was forced to abandon any offensive move, shrieking to intercept the projectile, shattering it to harmless dust mere feet from their terrified faces. Each time Zod attacked, it was a feint toward the man of tomorrow and a genuine kill shot toward the humans that were in the vicinity. Superman became a frantic blue and red shield, a blur of desperate motion, forced to absorb, deflect, or intercept every blow that was to come. He was playing the most cruel game of chess, where Zod could attack the king by targeting all the pawns, and Superman was the only piece that was around on the board to defend them all. The tide of the battle turned decisively. Zod was no longer brawling, he was surgically dismantling his opponent. Every time Superman shot forward to block a blast aimed at a fleeing family, Zod was already moving, predicting the path. As Superman tanked a heat vision blast meant for a school bus, Zod closed the distance and drove a fist not at his jaw, but precisely into his solar plexus, knocking the wind from him in a choked gasp. When Superman caught a thrown car to save its occupants, Zod was there, delivering a vicious kidney punch that sent waves of nauseating pain through the Kryptonian's body. Superman's movements began to slow, his breath coming in ragged heaves. Each act of salvation came at a terrible personal cost. A blow to a vital organ, a disorienting strike to the temple, a shattering impact against his ribs, a sickening pattern emerged. A saved human life was immediately paid for with a piece of Superman's strength. Zod's face was a mask of cold and triumphant fury, mixed with a sadistic smirk. He was winning not by being the strongest, but by being the cruelest, exploiting the one weakness his opponent would never shed, his compassion for the weak. A flash of light, followed by a ripple of receding energy, and Goku stood once more on the soil of the earth. The familiar air was thick with the acrid scent of smoke and fear. He immediately closed his eyes, extending his key sense across the globe, a psychic radar mapping the chaos that was around the earth. He found Diana first. Her unique energy signature was fierce but flickering, locked in a struggle with another, darker power. Further away, a raging monstrously high power level that could only be the other Saiyan. Probably it had to be Nappa. He was clashing violently with a familiar focus energy, Piccolo. But then his senses brushed against a battle much closer, in a city that was screaming in pain. He sensed Superman, the bright, hopeful sun of his energy, but it was dimming, fluctuating wildly under a brutal assault, and the energy attacking him, it felt almost the same. The same celestial origin, the same solar-powered core, but twisted into something cold, hateful, and outright ruthless. Anxiety, a rare emotion for Goku, clenched at his gut. His brother seemed to be losing. Nappa and Piccolo were warriors born for battle, but Clark was more a protector before anything else, which seemed to be costing him in this fight. With a grimace of decision, Goku clenched his fists. Nappa and Vegeta would have to wait. His brother needed him now. Superman staggered, his vision swimming. The world was a dizzying carousel of panic. Fire in Zod's merciless face, gasping for a breath that wouldn't come. His body screaming from a dozen internal energies. He threw a wild, desperate punch. It was telegraphed, fueled by anguish rather than skill. Zod didn't even bother to block it. He simply flowed around it, his movements efficient and cold as Superman's fists whistled harmlessly past his head. Zod's own hands shot out like vipers. One hand clamped onto Superman's bicep to anchor him, while the other seized his forearm. Using Superman's own momentum against him, Zod twisted with a brutal, precise force. Then there was a sickening, wet pop, a sound that was horrifyingly audible even over the chaos of the city sirens. A white-hot bolt of agony, unlike any he had ever felt, lanced through Superman's entire being. A guttural cry of pain was torn from his throat as he fell to one knee, his right arm now hanging uselessly and grotesquely at his side, his shoulder joint violently separated from its socket, taking his shoulder out of place. Standing over his kneeling, crippled foe, Zod's victory seemed absolute at this point. "You see, Kal-El, this is what mercy earns you." To emphasize this point, he turned away from Superman and leveled his hand at a nearby Art Deco tower. And with a single blast of heat vision, he sliced through its base, and with a groan of tearing metal and crumbling concrete, the entire structure began to topple. Superman could only watch in helpless horror, his good arm outstretched as people ran screaming from the shadow of the falling giant. Zod then slowly turned his gaze toward a city bus that had been abandoned in the middle of the street, with its passengers trapped, so they were forced to hide behind the seats, too terrified to even try to escape. He began to walk toward it, each step a death knell. "If these creatures bury their dead," Zod stated, his voice cold and devoid of emotion, "they will need many graves." He reached the bus, his fingers digging into the metal of its roof like it was foil. The anger that had been simmering in Superman's heart began to boil over, fueled by pain and this unimaginable cruelty, as he lifted up the truck. As Zod's fingers tightened on the bus roof, preparing to hurl it and its human cargo into the surrounding buildings, a fundamental switch flipped inside Superman. The pain in his shoulder vanished, replaced by a cold, pure fury. The world seemed to slow down with the roar that channeled the grief of a lost world and the rage for a threatened one. He moved, Phoom, ignoring the searing protest from his dislocated shoulder. He became a crimson blur. Zod, smug in his triumph, only had time to widen his eyes before Superman was upon him. And Superman didn't throw a punch. He simply reared his head back and then slammed his forehead directly into the bridge of Zod's nose with the force of a planetary impact. The sound was like a mountain cracking. Zod's head snapped back as a spray of dark Kryptonian blood misted within the air. His grip on the bus faltered instantly, staggering backwards. His eyes lost focus, swimming with concussion and utter shock. The invincible general for the first time felt true disorienting pain on this world. The unthinkable had happened. The kind-hearted Boy Scout had finally been pushed too far. Before Zod could even process the concussion, Superman's eyes ignited with solar fury. But this was no precise beam. It was a continuous, full-power torrent of raw energy. A blinding pillar of sunfire, bathed in red, that struck Zod square in his chest and lifted him off his feet. The force was immense, punching him through the atmosphere in a matter of seconds. The custom Kryptonian saiyan armor he wore, designed for wars he'd been on in hundreds if not thousands of worlds, it started to glow a white hot under the assault. Then it began to crack, then cracked, spiderweb with fractures before pieces of it began to vaporize entirely. Superman never let up, the relentless stream pushing Zod further and further away from the Earth. The blue sky deepening to black, the stars appearing. The heat vision wasn't just burning, it was propelling a cosmic catapult, firing its vile payload away from the planet that he loved. Zod, stunned and armless, could only flail against the incandescent force, a leaf in a hurricane of righteous anger. Being hurled into the silent, airless void of space until Superman used his remaining working hand to grab onto Zod's face and crash him into the surface of the moon, burying him in its white crust. Superman landed back in the epicenter of destruction, his feet touching the broken asphalt gently. The cold rage that had fueled his final assault had receded, leaving behind a hollow, aching sorrow. He looked around at the shattered city, the fires, the dust, the silence that had replaced the panic. His shoulders slumped. He had won the round, but the cost was written everywhere. He had failed to protect so much. But then his super hearing began to pick up sounds that confused him. Heartbeats, many of them clustered together and safe. He turned, and his eyes widened. The bus Zod had been holding was now safely on the ground. Its passengers being helped out by a figure in an orange gi, who was moving at impossible speeds to the human eye. A blur that was the figure stopped for a moment, offering a woman a hand, and turned. A familiar grinning face met his own. Relief, profound and overwhelmingly, washed over Superman. The weight on his soul lightened just a fraction. Goku. Goku? He breathed. A real smile finally gracing his features. His brother had made it home. The relief of Superman's face was fleeting, quickly replaced by the grim reality of their situation. Goku, it's Zod, he said, his voice strained with pain and urgency. He's Kryptonian like me. The yellow sun gives him the same powers. Every second we stand here, he's recovering, just as I am. He gestured weakly to his own shoulder, which was already knitting itself back together with audible pops. I can beat him back, but I don't think I can put him down for good. He'll just keep coming back, probably stronger every time, and this city can't take much more damage. Goku listened intently, his usual cheerfulness replaced by a focused seriousness. He scanned the horizon, his battle instincts and key sensing, assessing a problem. A guy with the same powers as you, huh? That is a problem, Goku mused, rubbing his chin. Then his eyes lit up. But I think I've got an idea. A portal to another dimension called the Dead Zone is still open inside the Hall of Justice. Nothing that goes can ever come out by themselves, as it is now, not even light. If we can trap him in there, his powers won't matter, and he'll be in a void outside of time. And the best part, Goku added, a determined glint in his eye. Raven is trapped in there too. We'd be saving her and stopping Zod at the same time. As the final words of his plan left his mouth, Goku's body suddenly stiffened. His head snapped to the east, his senses stretching across the continent. A colossal familiar energy signature had just erupted with volcanic intensity. It was Piccolo's ki, but it was different, vastly more powerful than anything he'd ever felt from his rival before, and it was tangled with a chilling ancient malevolence that made the hair on Goku's arms stand up. It wasn't just a power-up, it was a fundamental transformation. The surge was so immense, so sudden, it created a psychic shockwave that rippled through the spiritual fabric of the earth. Goku's brow furrowed in deep concern, momentarily pulling his focus from the immediate Kryptonian's threat. "Whoa," he whispered, his voice low with awe and apprehension. "What was that?" Piccolo's energy just went crazy. It feels like him, but it also feels like someone or something else, too. A cold dread trickled down his spine. That battle he was in was about to be over. He had no doubt about it. Miles away, amidst a field of craters that was once a pristine forest, Prince Vegeta stood over a panting Wonder Woman, a smirk of arrogance, satisfaction on his face. "You fight well for a primitive Amazon." "A primitive princess," he sneered, raising a palm glowing with destructive-like energy. "But this is about to come to its close." And then suddenly, the scouter fixed over his eye emitted a series of frantic high-pitched beeps before overloading with a crackle of sparks. Vegeta flinched, grabbing the side of his head as the device briefly shorted out. His smirk vanished, replaced by a look of stunned confusion that quickly morphed into furious disbelief. He had just been tracking Nappa's brutish, predictable energy signature that was nearby. But this was something else entirely. A power level so monstrous it dwarfed the elite saiyans, exploding onto his sensors with the force of a supernova. If he could feel energy signatures right now, this one would have been cold, supernatural, and overwhelming with ancient power. That felt nothing like the simple-minded Nappa. "What in the name of all worlds?" Vegeta growled, his head whipping around in the direction of the surge, his fight with the Amazonian princess completely forgotten. That power, it wasn't Nappa. But who else on this filthy rock could possibly possess such strength? A sonic boom cracked the sky as Zod descended, his body fully healed. Not fully healed, but it was getting there. But his armor wasn't so lucky. His eyes burning with renewed hatred, he scanned for Kal-El. Instead, his eyes landed on Goku. He paused, hovering, a flicker of recognition crossing his features. The black spiky hair, similar face, it was unmistakably reminiscent of the low-class warrior that was once his ally, Bardock, his former comrade. A cruel, condescending smile spread across his face. "You," Zod stated, his voice dripping with disdain. "The spitting image of Bardock. You must be Kakarot, the one who got away, the one sent to this planet to survive." He gestured broadly to the destruction that was around him. "Look at this world, Kakarot. Weak, fragile, unworthy of our kinds. Your purpose was to conquer it, I have no doubt. Abandon this farce. Join me. Together, we can forge an empire worthy of our powers and purge this universe of Frieza and his influence." Goku simply listened, his expression unreadable. When Zod finished, Goku didn't look angry or tempted. He just offered a small, knowing smile and pointed a thumb over his own shoulder. "Well, that was a pretty big speech and all," Goku said cheerfully. "But I think you forgot about your real opponent." Zod's eyes widened a fraction of a second before a blue and red blur, having used the distraction to circle a globe, slammed into him from behind at a significant fraction of light speed. Superman had not been idle. The moment Goku had provided the opening, he had shot into the upper atmosphere, flying a full, furious circuit around the entire Earth with every mile he drank in the solar energy, his sails screaming with amplified power, his dislocated shoulder snapping back into place with a surge of adrenaline. He wasn't just flying, he was building up momentum, becoming a living bullet with a single target. And he struck Zod from behind with the force of a continent shifting. The impact was catastrophic. knocking the wind from Zod and sending them both careening uncontrollably through the sky. Zod roared in fury, driving his elbows backward into Superman's ribs with blows that could shatter diamonds. Terror spread across Superman's costume, but his grip was reinforced by sheer unyielding will. It was ironclad. What is this? Release me, you fool, Zod bellowed, ignoring the pain. Superman's eyes glowed with a soft internal light. His X-ray vision activated, piercing through miles of the cityscape, through the layers of reinforced concrete and lead lining directly into the depths of the surface version of the Hall of Justice. He pinpointed the exact room, saw the swirling chaotic vortex of the Dead Zone portal. Adjusting their trajectory by a fraction of a degree, he aimed their uncontrollable flight like a missile. And with the final Herculean effort, Superman poured every ounce of his remaining strength into one last push. They blasted through the ceiling of the hall, debris raining around them. For a split second, Zod's eyes widened in confusion at the strange, light-devouring portal that was before them. Superman hurled him forward directly into the abyss as Zod vanished into the infinite blackness with a final fading cry of rage. The magical backlash from the portal's use shattered the anchoring device. The portal collapsed in on itself with a sound like a dying universe, and from the fading energies, a pale, exhausted Raven fell gently to the floor, free at last. The moment the portal sealed, the immense strain of the last few minutes, the grievous energies, the solar energy expenditure of his global sprint, or flight sprint, I don't know how you would say that, the psychic toll of holding a struggling Zod, and a final universe-bending push crashed down on Superman all at once. The invincible man of tomorrow stumbled, his knees buckling. The world swam before his eyes, the colors blurring into a nauseating swirl. He collapsed onto the cold floor of the Hall of Justice, his body finally succumbing to total exhaustion. He was conscious, but utterly spent. Every muscle fiber was screaming in protest. His vision dotted with black spots. A few feet away, Raven groaned softly, pushing herself up on trembling arms. Her connection to the dead zone had been severed violently, and the metaphysical whiplash was quite immense. She felt hollowed out. Her demonic half was strangely fluctuating. Her body was racked with a deep fatigue that made even lifting her head a monumental task. The two heroes, the son of Krypton and the daughter of Azeroth, lay side by side on the floor, breathing raggedly, united in their sheer, hard-won respite. Vegeta's attention was wholly consumed by the mysterious energy spike, and by the time he came back, he turned to the Amazon warrior who had been on the verge of defeating. Such power, who could that be? I will find its source and crush it myself, he vowed, his pride wounded that another could possess such strength on this backwater world. He was so engrossed that he failed to notice the faintest ripple that was in the air behind him. Vegeta's head barely had time to start turning, his scouter emitting a single confused beep at the sudden close proximity power level, and then a boot clad in worn out training battle gear connected squarely with the side of his head. The kick wasn't just powerful, it was perfectly timed, leveraging Vegeta's own distraction. The Prince of all Saiyans was lifted off his feet, his arrogant smirk replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated shock. He flew sideways like a discarded toy, crashing through the trunk of a massive oak tree before plowing into a gigantic granite boulder with a thunderous impact that spiderwebbed the stone. As dust and debris settled, Goku landed lightly between Vegeta and the stunned Wonder Woman, cracking his knuckles with a fierce grin on his face. Glad I made it in time. Alright, so that's the end of this episode, man. Let me know if you guys liked it. If you did, be sure you like, share, subscribe, all that, man. Until the next one, go on, peace.